The space station drifted silently through the void, its lights flickering weakly. Ethan, a young human engineer, had been sent to repair the abandoned outpost after it went dark. It was supposed to be a routine job, one that would be over in a few days. But Ethan had no idea that this mission would change his life forever. He worked alone, moving between different rooms and compartments, fixing power cables, rewiring circuits, and checking systems. The silence of the station was almost comforting, like a forgotten world that had been abandoned by time itself. But as he made his way down a narrow corridor, something caught his eye. Movement. At first he thought it was a shadow, but then he saw it clearly. A figure stood at the far end of the hallway. Ethan froze. The figure was tall, almost 7 feet, and cloaked in dark armor. The alien stood perfectly still, its glowing eyes locking onto his. There was a strange energy in the air, a feeling that something dangerous was approaching. Ethan didn't know who this person was, but the cold look in their eyes told him they weren't here to chat. Suddenly, the figure moved. Fast. Too fast. Before Ethan could react, the alien lunged at him with incredible speed, its hand reaching for something on its belt. In a flash, the alien drew a glowing blade, its blue light illuminating the dark hallway. The weapon moved toward him like a streak of lightning, and in that instant, Ethan realized the true danger he was facing. His heart raced. Without thinking, he ducked, narrowly avoiding the deadly slash. The blade whizzed above his head, cutting through the air with a sound like a sharp wind. Ethan's instincts kicked in and he dove to the side, rolling across the floor to avoid the next attack. The alien was relentless. It swung the blade again, this time aiming for his chest. Ethan scrambled to his feet and grabbed the nearest tool he could find, a heavy wrench. With all the strength he could muster, he blocked the blade, the metal wrench clashing against the glowing weapon with a loud bang. For a moment, they stood locked in a fierce struggle. Ethan could feel the heat of the blade against the metal wrench, and the alien's strength was overwhelming. But Ethan wasn't about to give up that easily. He gritted his teeth, using every ounce of his strength to push back, forcing the alien to stumble slightly. His opponent was skilled. Ethan could see it in the way the alien moved. Each strike was calculated, precise, and deadly. The alien's speed was beyond anything he had ever encountered before. Yet despite the odds, Ethan held his ground. He had spent years in tough situations back on Earth, and this was just another challenge he had to overcome. The alien's eyes burned with anger, its focus entirely on Ethan. There was no hesitation, no mercy. It was a fight to the death. Ethan felt the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He needed to end this now or he wouldn't have a chance. With a sudden, desperate move, the alien swung the blade with all its might. Ethan barely managed to deflect it with the wrench, but the force of the blow knocked him off balance. He fell to the floor, the wrench slipping from his grasp. Before he could react, the alien was upon him, its blade poised for the kill. Time seemed to slow down. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest and his mind raced. This was it. There was no way out. He had fought hard, but the alien was too strong, too fast. But then something unexpected happened. The alien hesitated. For a split second it stopped, its blade hovering above him. Ethan, dazed and confused, stared into the alien's eyes. They weren't filled with rage or hatred anymore. Instead, they seemed uncertain. There was something in the alien's gaze, something that made Ethan question everything he thought he knew. The alien's hand trembled, the blade shaking slightly. Ethan's confusion only grew. What was happening? Why had the alien stopped? In that moment of hesitation, Ethan saw an opportunity. He reached out, grabbing the alien's arm and twisting it, using the little strength he had left. The blade slipped from the alien's hand, falling to the floor with a soft clang. Ethan scrambled to his feet, and before the alien could react, he quickly grabbed the weapon and pointed it at her. For a long moment they stood there in silence, the tension thick in the air. Ethan's breathing was heavy, his heart still racing. The alien didn't move. She didn't speak. Her golden eyes met his with an intensity that left him speechless. "You could have killed me," Ethan said. his voice shaky, though he still held the blade steady. But you didn't. The alien didn't answer. Instead, she lowered her head slightly, as though ashamed. Ethan watched her carefully, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He had just narrowly escaped death, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this encounter than he realized. Finally, the alien spoke, her voice soft and almost hesitant. I wasn't sent to kill you. I was sent to capture you? Ethan blinked, confused. Capture me? She nodded slowly, still avoiding his gaze. But things didn't go as planned. Ethan didn't know what to make of it. The confusion in the alien's eyes mirrored his own. Why had she hesitated? What was her true mission? He lowered the blade, still unsure of how to proceed. This was no longer just a fight for survival. Something deeper, something unexpected was unfolding right in front of him. The questions kept piling up, and for the first time in his life, Ethan realized that the danger he faced wasn't over yet. It had only just begun. Ethan watched as the alien slowly lowered her weapon, her golden eyes still filled with conflict. The tension between them hung in the air like a storm ready to burst. He couldn't make sense of it. Just moments ago, she had been trying to end his life, yet now there was a strange hesitation, almost as if she regretted the attack. Ethan's hand trembled slightly as he held the blade. He had survived, but for what? He wasn't sure he was any safer now than he had been when the fight started. His mind raced with questions. Why had she hesitated? What was her true mission? The silence stretched on until the alien, still on her knees, let out a soft breath. I wasn't supposed to kill you, she said, her voice almost a whisper. Ethan's grip tightened on the blade. Then why did you attack me? I was ordered, she replied, her tone apologetic. But there was something else in her voice, fear, regret? He couldn't tell. Her words hit Ethan like a hammer. He had been an engineer, used to fixing things, but this was something entirely different. Why had she attacked him if her mission wasn't to kill? There had to be more to this than he understood. You were sent to capture me? Ethan asked, his voice still shaky from the close call. The alien nodded, but didn't speak for a moment. The fight had been fast, brutal, and now it was over. Or was it? Ethan's mind began to race. If she wasn't sent to kill him, why was she so ready to do so? What had brought her here? I wasn't prepared for you, she continued, her words barely audible now. Humans, you're unpredictable. I didn't expect you to fight back. I didn't expect you to survive. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with something almost like awe. You're different. The last thing Ethan expected was sympathy from this alien. She had been a trained hunter after all, capable of killing without mercy. And yet, here she was, kneeling before him as if her entire world had been shaken. Ethan took a cautious step back, lowering the blade slightly but still holding it tightly. So what now? He asked. For a moment, the alien didn't answer. She seemed lost in thought. Her sharp features softened in a way he hadn't expected. She wasn't just an enemy anymore. She was a person, maybe more like him than he first realized. I need to heal, she said finally, her voice almost too soft to hear. But I can't stay here. You'll try to kill me again if I do, won't you? Ethan could feel his own uncertainty creeping in. Should he let her go, or keep her captive? His mind told him to be cautious, to trust no one, especially not someone who had tried to end his life. But his gut told him something else. It told him that this was far from over, and maybe, just maybe, he had a chance to understand what was really going on. He looked down at her, the alien bounty hunter who had tried to kill him and yet now seemed so human. No, he finally said, his voice steadier than before. I won't kill you, but you have to promise me something. You can't attack me again. If you do, I will defend myself. Understood? Her eyes flickered with something between relief and disbelief. I understand, she said quietly, her voice barely a breath. Ethan wasn't sure what he was getting himself into, but one thing was clear. He couldn't let her go. Not yet. Something deep within him told him that her presence here, this strange encounter, wasn't a coincidence. He took a deep breath. All right then. You're staying here until you're healed, but no funny business. Got it? The alien didn't say anything at first, but slowly she nodded. There was an awkward silence and uncomfortable stillness that filled the room. Neither of them knew what to say next. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice still soft. I don't want to kill you. I don't even want to fight you anymore. Ethan looked at her, trying to read her expression. She wasn't making any threats. She wasn't posturing. It seemed like a simple admission, but to him it felt like something much deeper, something that was building between them, something that neither of them could yet understand. I'll make you a deal, Ethan said, still unsure of where this was headed. You let me help you fix the station and I'll help you get out of here safely. But first you need to rest and recover. The alien's gaze softened, though she remained cautious. You would help me? Ethan nodded. I don't know why, but I feel like I should. It was an answer that neither of them fully understood, but somehow it was enough. For the first time since their encounter, the alien's shoulders relaxed. She wasn't sure why Ethan had spared her, but in that moment it didn't matter. She wasn't alone anymore. She had underestimated humans, and now she had to learn how to trust one. The danger wasn't over. But for the first time since her mission began, the alien girl felt like there might be a way forward, not as enemies, but perhaps as allies. Ethan didn't know what to make of the situation. The alien girl, who had tried to end his life just hours earlier, was now sitting across from him in his small, makeshift living area. She was no longer the enemy, but her presence still felt strange, like an uninvited guest that had overstayed their welcome. She sat silently, her golden eyes scanning the room as if studying every detail. Her once pristine armor was now dented and battered from their fight, but she didn't seem concerned about it. Instead, she seemed lost in thought, her mind likely somewhere far away, caught between her mission and the strange turn of events that had led her here. Ethan kept his distance, trying to process everything that had happened. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even a fighter. He was just a repairman stuck in a situation he hadn't asked for. But now the alien girl, Viola, was here, recovering in his station. She had no weapon, no means to escape, and she had no choice but to stay. So, Ethan said, breaking the silence, how long until you're healed? Viola didn't answer immediately. She glanced up at him, her expression unreadable. It's hard to say, she muttered, her voice still thick with uncertainty. I've been trained to endure pain, but I've never been in a situation like this. Ethan nodded, unsure of how to respond. Right. He shifted on his feet, still uncomfortable with how everything had changed. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to fix the station and move on. But instead, his life had turned into something much more complicated. Viola's eyes locked onto him again. You're strange, human. There was a hint of curiosity in her voice, but also something deeper, almost like admiration, though she quickly masked it. You should have killed me, you had every reason to, but you didn't. Ethan frowned, caught off guard by her directness. I didn't want to kill you, he replied quietly. I don't know why, but I didn't. Vela tilted her head slightly. Is that how humans think? You don't just kill your enemies without reason? Not all of us, Ethan said with a shrug. I mean, I'm not perfect, but I don't think killing solves anything. Her lips twitched, as if she might smile, but quickly stopped herself. You're not like the others. The others would have finished me off without a second thought. Ethan leaned back against the wall, trying to put some space between them. He didn't know what to feel. Was she trying to manipulate him? Or was this some strange twist of fate? Either way, they were stuck together for the moment. And even though he didn't fully trust her, he couldn't just leave her to die. "So," Ethan said again, his mind searching for something to break the tension. "What now?" Vela stood up slowly, still weak but determined. She stepped closer to the workbench where he had set his tools. "I need to fix my armor. It's the only thing keeping me alive out there," she said, her voice steady now. "I can't go back without it." Ethan watched her carefully. "How did you end up here anyway? You said you were sent to capture me. Who sent you?" For a moment, Vela's eyes darkened. "The Syndicate," she said flatly. "A mercenary group that thrives on capturing and selling off bounties. They don't care who they hurt, just profit." Ethan's frown deepened. "And you just followed orders?" "I had no choice," Vela replied, her voice betraying a hint of regret. "They have my family. They know where they are." The weight of her words settled between them. Ethan hadn't expected her to open up like this, and he wasn't sure how to react. She was a hunter, a killer by trade, yet here she was, showing vulnerability. "Why didn't you just run?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious. "If they have your family, why are you still working for them?" Vela hesitated. "Because if I run, they'll kill them. If I stop hunting, they'll hunt me instead. It's a choice between keeping them alive or losing them forever." Ethan stared at her, stunned. For the first time since their encounter, he saw the person behind the armor. She wasn't just a bounty hunter, she was someone trapped just like anyone else, forced into a life she didn't choose. "Listen," Ethan said, his voice softer now. "I can't promise I can help you with your family, but if you need to fix that armor, I can help with that." Vela looked at him in surprise, her gaze unreadable. "Why would you help me?" Ethan shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe because you didn't kill me when you had the chance." A faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "You really are different." Before either of them could say more, the station's lights flickered briefly, casting shadows across the walls. Vela stiffened, her senses instantly alert. Ethan, too, looked around, his heart rate picking up. Was someone else here? Was the Syndicate already hunting her down? "Stay quiet," Vela whispered, her tone low but commanding. "There's something out there." Ethan's pulse quickened as he moved closer to the nearest control panel. He knew this station better than anyone else. He'd been fixing it for days, but something felt wrong. Something had changed. And now, with an alien bounty hunter in his care, it was more dangerous than ever. The two of them stood there, tense, listening for any sign of danger. In that moment, it became clear. Their uneasy alliance might be the only thing keeping them alive. And in a twisted turn of fate, the hunter and the hunted had become unlikely partners. The station hummed quietly in the background, its faint mechanical noises filling the stillness of the room. Outside, the endless blackness of space stretched out beyond the small window, a cold, indifferent void. Ethan leaned against the workbench, silently watching Vela as she worked to repair her armor. Despite the tension between them, he couldn't help but be fascinated by the way she moved. Graceful, yet calculating, as if every motion was a part of a larger plan. For the first time, Ethan found himself wondering what it was like to live in her world, a world where survival was everything, and compassion had no place. He had always taken the luxury of peace for granted. But here, with her, an alien bounty hunter who had tried to kill him, he was beginning to understand that the universe wasn't just a place of wonder and opportunity. It was also a place of violence, deceit, and harsh realities. Vela paused, her fingers hovering over a damaged panel of her armor. The light from the small overhead lamp reflected off her face, and for a moment, Ethan saw something he hadn't expected: vulnerability. Her usual hardened expression was gone, replaced by something softer, more human. "I didn't want to do this," she murmured, almost to herself. Ethan tilted his head, unsure if she was talking to him or simply lost in her own thoughts. Do what? Become this, she said, her voice low. A weapon, a tool. I was just a girl once, back on my home planet. I had dreams, hopes. She paused, her eyes distant, as if reliving something painful. I never imagined I'd be this monster. Ethan took a hesitant step toward her. I'm not sure I understand, he said gently. You're not a monster. She cut him off, shaking her head quickly. You don't know what it's like to be raised, for one thing, to be trained to kill from the moment you can hold a weapon. Her eyes flashed with anger, but it was quickly replaced with something else, regret. I don't even remember the last time I did something just for myself. Everything I've ever done was for someone else's gain. I was a tool, just like I was meant to be. Ethan was silent for a long moment, processing her words. His mind kept going back to the fight, the way she had looked at him just before she struck. There had been no joy in her eyes, no pleasure in trying to take his life. She hadn't been a monster. She had been a person in pain, caught in a situation she couldn't escape. I get it, Ethan said finally. I get feeling trapped. Sometimes, we all get stuck in things we didn't choose, but that doesn't mean it's who we are. It's just part of the story. You can still choose how it ends. Viola didn't respond immediately. She simply continued to work on her armor, her hands moving with practiced precision, though the movement lacked the usual speed and fluidity. She was still recovering, both physically and emotionally. And for the first time, Ethan saw it. She wasn't just an alien in front of him. She was someone trying to figure out who she really was. Ethan walked closer, carefully stepping over the piles of scattered tools and wires on the floor. I don't know about you, but I've made my fair share of mistakes. I've hurt people. Sometimes I wonder if I've even hurt myself by staying on this station for so long. But I always try to fix things, to make it right. You can do that too. Her eyes met his, and for a fleeting moment it felt like time had slowed. Viola's gaze wasn't cold anymore. There was something raw in her eyes, something that spoke of lost chances and missed opportunities. I don't know how to fix anything, she whispered. I've been broken for so long. How do you fix something that's already beyond repair? Ethan's heart ached for her. He didn't have all the answers, but one thing he did know was this. Nothing was truly beyond repair as long as you had the courage to try. We start small, Ethan said, his voice soft but firm, one step at a time. First, we fix that armor. Then we fix the station. And after that, we take it from there. Viola looked at him, her lips pressing together as if unsure of what to say. The walls that had once separated them, the walls of distrust and violence, were beginning to crumble, but they were still there, lingering between them like an invisible barrier. She looked down at her armor, fingers tracing the damaged edges. Then slowly she looked back up at him. You don't know what this means to me, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You're offering me a chance I never thought I'd have. Ethan smiled faintly. Everyone deserves a chance, even bounty hunters. Viola's eyes softened, and for the first time since their encounter, she allowed herself to relax. There were still doubts in her mind, and the shadows of her past loomed large. But in that moment, she allowed herself to hope. She had never thought someone like Ethan would show her kindness, let alone offer to help her. But here she was, standing at a crossroads, a place where she could choose to go down a new path, away from the darkness of her past. I don't know where this will go, Viola said quietly. But I think I'd like to find out. Ethan nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. Then we'll figure it out together. The walls that had once divided them were still there, but for the first time they were starting to crumble. And as the station's lights flickered once more, it felt as though something new was beginning, something neither of them had expected, but both of them were willing to try. Their journey wasn't over yet. But at least, for now, they weren't facing it alone. The quiet hum of the station had become a constant companion, but tonight the silence felt heavier than usual. The repairs were coming along steadily, but there was something else in the air, something electric. It wasn't just the constant buzz of the broken circuits or the failing power supply. It was the unspoken tension between Ethan and Vela. A new layer had formed between them, something neither of them could ignore anymore. Ethan sat at the far end of the small room tinkering with a faulty power cell, his mind wandering. He had never imagined that a simple repair job would lead him to this, sitting next to an alien bounty hunter who had tried to kill him. But here they were, working side by side, in an odd sort of partnership that neither of them fully understood. Vela's back was to him as she carefully worked on a set of damaged circuits in her armor. The faint blue glow of the room highlighted the intricate designs of her alien technology, which Ethan had begun to recognize as the core of her survival. Without her armor, she would be vulnerable. He hadn't fully grasped the complexity of her world until now, the way her life, her purpose had been built around survival at all costs. As Ethan focused on his work, he couldn't help but glance at Vela every now and then. He wasn't sure if it was the quiet companionship or if it was something more, but there was a pull between them, something that went beyond the initial distrust, beyond the battle for survival. Every small moment, every gesture seemed to carry weight, and each time their eyes met, a spark ignited between them, unspoken but undeniable. Vela was no longer the cold, calculated killer she had been when they first met. He could see the cracks in her armor, literal and metaphorical. But the more time they spent together, the more Ethan realized that she was still a force to be reckoned with. She was strong, resilient, and surprisingly vulnerable all at once. As the minutes ticked by, Vela finally spoke, her voice quieter than usual. "I've never worked with someone like this before." Ethan paused, unsure if she was referring to their work or something deeper. He set his tools down and looked at her back still turned to him. "What do you mean?" "The way you trust me," she said, still focused on her armor. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've done, what I've been forced to do. And yet, you're still here. You're helping me." "Why?" Ethan took a deep breath, pushing aside the nagging doubts that still lingered at the back of his mind. "I don't really know," he said, his voice honest. "I guess. I just feel like people deserve a chance. Even you." Her hand stilled for a moment and she glanced back at him, her golden eyes searching his face. "You're different, Ethan." He met her gaze and smiled faintly. "So are you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the past hung in the air, but it was the weight of something else that was starting to settle in between them. Something heavier, something they hadn't yet addressed. The connection, the pull that neither of them could ignore any longer. As Viola turned back to her work, Ethan found himself stepping closer, a force drawing him to her in a way he couldn't quite explain. The air felt warmer, charged with something electric. Without thinking, he reached out to help her adjust a component that seemed to be malfunctioning. His fingers brushed hers, and the brief contact sent a jolt through him. Something unexpected, something undeniable. Vela stiffened, her breath catching. She didn't pull away, but there was a tension in her body that spoke volumes. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to someone getting this close. She wasn't used to kindness, to human warmth. She had spent so long in a world where her body and mind were nothing more than tools to be used and discarded. The touch of another person, someone who didn't see her as an enemy, was unsettling, but also strangely comforting. Ethan noticed the change in her posture and immediately withdrew his hand, his face flushing slightly. He wasn't sure what had come over him, but he knew it was something new, something that had been building between them, slowly, silently. And now, it was out in the open. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, his voice slightly strained. "I didn't mean..." Vela shook her head, her expression softening. "No, it's all right," she said quietly. "I'm just not used to this." I'm not used to people caring." Her words hung in the air like a confession, raw and unguarded. Ethan wanted to say something to reassure her, but the words seemed to get stuck in his throat. What could he say? How could he explain that he hadn't meant for this to happen, that he hadn't expected to feel this way? Instead, he took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "You don't have to be used to it. You deserve it." There was a long silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that spoke louder than words, the kind of silence that only existed when two people were on the edge of something new, something uncertain. The air was thick with unspoken thoughts, emotions that neither of them knew how to articulate. Finally, Viola broke the silence with a small, almost hesitant smile. Maybe I do deserve it. Maybe I deserve more than just being a weapon." Ethan smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through him. Though it was different from the warmth of the room, this was something more, something that made his heart beat a little faster. "Yeah," he said softly, "you do." And in that moment, it wasn't just the station that felt charged. It was them. Two beings, from different worlds, standing on the precipice of something neither of them fully understood but both felt deeply. The walls that had once separated them were crumbling piece by piece, and they both knew, without saying a word, that there was no going back. The sparks had already been ignited, and whatever happened next, they would face it together. The station's emergency lights flickered in the dimly lit hallway, casting long shadows against the cold walls. Outside, the vast emptiness of space remained unbroken, indifferent to the tiny drama unfolding within the metallic walls of the station. Ethan's heart raced, and he could feel the air thick with tension. It wasn't just the station's failing systems or the repairs left to do. It was something else. Something in the way Vela had been looking at him lately. Something that made him feel like they were crossing an invisible line. But that wasn't what had his pulse quickening now. The sharp, unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. Too many. Not the usual hum of the station's automated systems or the random clang of broken machinery. No, these steps were deliberate, and they were getting closer. Vela froze, her expression instantly shifting from the calm focus she'd had while working to the alertness of a trained fighter. Her golden eyes narrowed, and Ethan could feel the tension in her shoulders. Without a word, she reached for the blaster holstered at her side, her fingers quick and practiced. But when she turned to face Ethan, he saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. "Something's not right," she murmured, her voice low but steady. "Get to the control room now." Ethan didn't argue. He didn't have time to. He grabbed his toolkit and quickly followed her as she moved toward the door, her steps light but purposeful. The two of them made their way down the narrow hallway, their breath coming faster with each step. But there was no escaping what was coming. Ethan's mind raced. Was it the syndicate? Had they tracked her down already? Or was this something worse? As they reached the intersection of the hallway, Viola stopped suddenly, her hand raised, signaling Ethan to stay back. She turned to him, her eyes locking with his. "You're not going to like this," she said, her voice strained. "But I need you to stay hidden." "Wait, what? Why?" Ethan asked, confusion rising in his chest. Before she could answer, the door at the end of the hallway slid open with a harsh hiss, and three armed figures stepped into view. Their black armor was adorned with the insignia of the syndicate, mercenaries, who specialized in capture, coercion, and cruelty. Ethan's heart sank as they slowly advanced down the hallway toward him and Vela. The largest of the three, an imposing figure with a scar across his face, grinned at the sight of Vela. Well, looks like the little runaway is still alive." Vela didn't flinch. Instead, her hand tightened around the blaster, her stance steady and unwavering. But the way she stood there, almost resigned, told Ethan that this was more than just a simple confrontation. "I should have known," Vela said, her voice cold as ice. "You won't stop until you've taken everything from me." The leader of the mercenaries chuckled darkly. "We're not here for everything, Vela. Just you." His eyes flicked to Ethan, who instinctively took a step back. And the human, he's just an obstacle. Vela's gaze flickered to Ethan, her eyes narrowing. She didn't want him to get caught in this, but he couldn't ignore the fact that these mercenaries were here because of her. And as much as he wanted to run, to escape from this mess, he couldn't. Not now. Not when he saw how the fear in her eyes had shifted to something far more dangerous, something more familiar. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped forward, but Vela quickly grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly firm. "No," she said, her voice sharp. "You need to stay out of this, it's my fight." "But they're after both of us," Ethan argued. "I can't just stand here and let them— Listen to me." Vela's voice cut through the tension, more forceful than it had ever been. "If you want to live, if you want to survive, you need to stay the hell out of this. You have no idea who these people are. They'll kill you without a second thought." Ethan stared at her, a mix of anger and confusion swirling in his chest. Was she really going to send him away? He thought they had gotten past this. He thought they had become something more than just enemies forced into an uneasy truce. "I'm not leaving you," he said, his voice steady but filled with the determination he hadn't known he had. Vela's eyes softened for a brief moment, but then the leader of the mercenaries took another step forward, raising his weapon. "Enough talk. You're both coming with us. Alive or dead, doesn't matter." Before anyone could react, Vela's blaster was raised and a shot rang out. The first mercenary fell to the floor with a grunt, a smoking hole in his armor. The other two immediately raised their weapons, firing back. Ethan dove for cover, his heart pounding in his chest as the station's walls erupted with gunfire. The cold, calculated precision of Vela's moves was something Ethan had never witnessed up close before. She was a fighter, a predator, and in that moment, she wasn't just an ally. She was his protector. The second mercenary fired again, but Vela was quicker. She ducked, rolled, and fired in one fluid motion, taking him down in an instant. Only the leader remained now, his face twisted with rage. "Traitor!" he shouted, his voice full of venom. He lunged forward, trying to tackle Vela, but she sidestepped him with ease, knocking him into the wall with a sickening thud. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The sound of gunfire, the echo of the fight, all faded into a single heartbeat. Vela stood over the mercenary, her blaster trained on him, her breathing steady. "You don't get to call me a traitor," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "I was never yours to control." Ethan watched in silence, his pulse racing. The mercenary leader's body twitched and he was still, knocked unconscious by Vela's blow. The room fell silent again, save for the hum of the failing systems and the distant sound of their breathing. Vela turned to Ethan, her face hardening once more. "Get to the control room. Now." Ethan's heart was still pounding in his chest, but he nodded. He didn't question her anymore. There was no going back from this. They were in this together now, whatever it meant. The fight was over, but the war was just beginning. The station's lights flickered one last time before settling into a steady, unbroken hum. The emergency alarms had long since gone silent, replaced by the quiet rhythm of machinery working to keep them alive. Ethan stood in the center of the control room, his mind still racing from the chaotic firefight that had nearly torn them apart. Yet despite the threat that had passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were still walking a razor-thin line between survival and something much darker. Vela stood beside him, her breath even, though her eyes were sharp with the weight of what had just happened. The syndicate had come for her, and for him, but they had fought back, together. Now the dust had settled. But what came next? Was the danger truly over? Or was this just the beginning of something even more dangerous? Ethan watched her, his thoughts caught between fear and fascination. This alien woman, this once cold bounty hunter, had become something more in his eyes. She was no longer a threat, no longer an enemy. She was an ally. Maybe even more than that. "I didn't think we'd make it," Vela said quietly, her voice unexpectedly soft as she turned to face him. The fire in her eyes had dulled, replaced by an exhaustion he recognized in her posture. Her armor was scuffed, battered from the fight, but she stood tall, unwavering, even after all they had been through. "I didn't think I could trust anyone again, especially not a human." Ethan hesitated, his voice low as he spoke, his heart suddenly louder in his chest. "You can trust me," he said, his eyes meeting hers with more conviction than he thought he had. "I'm not going anywhere. Not now." Viola was silent for a moment, as if considering his words carefully. Then, with a movement too quick for Ethan to react, she closed the distance between them. Before he knew it, her hand was on his chest, her touch warm and firm, but there was something else in it. Something soft, almost hesitant, like she wasn't sure whether she should be doing this. The air between them seemed to crackle, charged, with a new intensity. Ethan's pulse surged as he met her gaze, realizing, too late, that the space between them had never been smaller. "I can't believe you're still here," she whispered, her voice trembling just slightly. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Everything inside him screamed to pull away, to keep the distance he had fought so hard to maintain. But something in her eyes, a deep, raw need for connection, made it impossible for him to turn away. "You're not alone anymore," he said, softly, his hand instinctively reaching for her. His fingers brushed against her arm, the contact sending a jolt of warmth through him. For the first time since he had met her, Viola didn't pull away. Instead, she stepped closer, closing the final gap between them. Her breath was quick, her chest rising and falling as she looked up at him with a mix of emotions, vulnerability, longing, and something deeper that neither of them had yet spoken. Of Ethan's hand found the side of her face, his thumb lightly brushing over her skin. It was gentle, careful, as if he were afraid she might break under his touch. The moment hung between them, suspended in time, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan allowed himself to feel the depth of the connection that had been growing between them since that first fateful encounter. "Are you sure?" Viola asked, her voice barely a whisper, as though the words might shatter the fragile moment they had created. Her eyes searched his, looking for any hint of hesitation, any sign that he wasn't truly ready for what was about to happen. Ethan's breath slowed, his mind clearer than it had been in days. He wasn't sure where this was headed. He wasn't sure if this was love or something else entirely. But he knew one thing for certain. She was no longer the enemy. And he was no longer just a human trying to survive in a hostile galaxy. "I'm sure," he whispered back. With that, everything else faded into the background. The station, the danger, the past. None of it mattered anymore. There was only this moment. Only the way her hands found his and the way the world seemed to melt away when their lips met. It wasn't a fiery, desperate kiss. It was something more fragile than that. Something tentative, as if they were both afraid of what might happen once the wall between them came crashing down. But the more they kissed, the more the fear faded. The more the silence in the room became a comfort, not an obstacle. As they pulled back, breathless, Ethan's hands lingered on her shoulders, as if afraid to let go. Viola's golden eyes softened, and for the first time, she didn't look like a killer, a soldier, or a fugitive. She looked like a person, a woman who had been lost, and now, perhaps, had finally found someone who understood. "I don't know what happens next," she murmured, her forehead resting against his. Ethan smiled, his hand gently caressing her cheek. "I don't know either," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "but we'll figure it out. Together. The world outside might still be dangerous. The syndicate might still be coming for them. But for the first time since the chaos began, Ethan felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Hope. They had survived the worst. And now, with Viola at his side, they could face whatever came next. In that moment, as the hum of the station continued around them, the two of them knew that whatever the future held, they wouldn't face it alone. And that was enough. They had each other, and that was more than either of them had ever expected.